It's August 4th, 2021. I'm Todd Dunn, and today I'm going to give you a walk around of my 1936 wooden powerboat Tortuga, which is now officially listed for sale. The Yacht World listing should pop up any day now. So let's take a look at the boat. I'm going to start outside and we will walk around and look at as much of the boat as we can. And the transom is going to be a little hard to see, but other than that we can take a look and I'll tell you what the features of Tortuga are. Here's a port side view of the boat. You can see it's what's called a raised deck cruiser. The boat that's closest to it in design is a Blanchard 36 built in the Seattle area by Blanchard Boat Company back in the 20s and early 30s. And this boat is very, very similar to a Blanchard 36, but it is 32 feet 8 inches long instead of 36 feet. Tortuga is oak framed with a Douglas fir keel. The stem and the stern post are oak. The planking is 7/8 inch Douglas fir. It's fastened with bronze from about 8 inches above the waterline down, and stainless steel above that. And I have refastened most of the boat. There are still some original planks on the top sides that I haven't refastened that are still fastened with wrought iron boat nails. And top sides, they're in good shape. Now you can see there are 4 bronze port lights on each side in the lower cabin, and the upper cabin is faced with mahogany, which is gloss varnished, and there are 19 windows in the upper cabin and 10 of them open, so you get good ventilation if you want it. Now let's walk a little closer to the boat and take a look at some of the features. We'll start here at the bow, and you can see Tortuga has a very fine entry and lots of flare top sides, which makes the boat very dry. It rides very nicely, slices through waves, unless they're really close together when the boat can pound a little, but for normal waves it just slices right through them because of the fine entry. As we walk back, we'll see what some of the features are. Right on the bow, we have a stainless steel anchor roller to starboard of the stem, and on that anchor roller there's a Delta 22 anchor, and that anchor was chosen specifically because it is self-launching, and the controls for the anchor windlass, which you'll see in a second, are at the helm. The anchor is attached to 125 feet of 1/4 inch high test chain, and that chain is itself attached to 200 feet of 1/2 inch nylon anchor rod. So you've got 325 feet of anchor rod. The windlass is a Lumar Pro 700 horizontal windlass with a stainless steel body, and it works very well. The controls for it are at the helm. And that was intentional because it's a little difficult to get up onto the bow here to deal with the anchor. And as I said, the anchor is self-launching, so all you have to do is turn the windlass on and push the down switch, and down it goes. The Samson post is immediately behind the windlass. There's a bracket for a former anchor, which I haven't taken off because I just haven't been motivated to remove it and fill the holes in the deck that would leave. And there's also a hawse pipe for chain from back when there was no windlass. Now we've got a hatch after that, and that hatch has a new top. In the top there is a 7-inch bronze fixed port light to let light in underneath the hatch, and forward of that there is a brand new Marinco day-night solar powered vent that runs 24 hours a day to exhaust air from the boat, which is a great boon to keeping the boat smelling fresh. And I put that in about 3 weeks ago. Moving aft, we have a butterfly hatch underneath the sunbrella cover, and I just keep the cover on it because it's a real pain to varnish and I don't want the varnish to deteriorate. Then we've got the mast, which is a Douglas fir mast. It has an all-around white light at the top that doubles as the anchor light and a steaming light, and that is switched inside. And here's the cabin house. 2 fixed windows in front and 1 opening window in the center. And on the top of the cabin house, we have handrails on both sides, name boards with the side lights, and these are, I believe, the original bronze side lights. And they are for when you're underway at night. And of course, the name on the name board, those are varnished mahogany. And after that, we have 2 50-watt solar panels which keep the batteries charged up all the time. Right now, they're probably keeping the batteries at float. And as we move back along the side, we've got a fixed window with a nice for sale sign. The antenna for the VHF, which is brand new this year. I put it on in May. And then an opening port right next to the helm. And because Tortuga is relatively low in the water compared to a lot of modern boats, I can stand at the helm and reach out and put a line on a cleat when I bring the boat in to dock it. We've got 2 fixed windows, 2 more opening windows. These are the doors, if you will, that I use to board the boat. I will move back and look at the back of the cabin house. Oh, another for sale sign. There's a fixed window on either side and 2 opening windows in the center. And let me come back and look at something a little more closely here. See this little fitting here? When you open the window, that latches here to keep the window open so that you can run with that window open underway. And the starboard side of the boat is the same. They're stainless steel cleats and fair leads on the aft deck for tying the boat up. There's an original bronze cleat midships for putting your spring lines on, and a fair lead. And there's a small cleat here for attaching a fender to, and of course the Samson post at the bow for the bow line. And one other feature that's present on this side only is this stainless steel cowl vent. That is an exhaust vent for the engine compartment blower, which is a carryover from when this boat was gasoline powered. It's now diesel powered and you no longer need that blower, but I left it in to circulate air in the engine space. Immediately forward of that is one of the 2 diesel fuels for the 2 20-gallon diesel tanks. And on either side of the boat at the boarding area, there is a bronze step plate mounted so that you won't slip when you step onto the deck. Now, I've been meaning to paint the deck, but it just hasn't happened this year. There are little splotches where I've touched it up, and I will be repainting it this somewhat darker green. So let's go aboard. Tortuga is kept locked, not because of security reasons here in Maine, but because there's no other easy way to keep the various windows closed. So you just open that, pull this out, and it will latch into there. And those latches are sufficient to hold the window while the boat is underway. And here we have a handle to pull it shut, and down at the bottom a barrel bolt to lock it shut when you're aboard. Okay, I forgot one thing. That's the transom, which you can see here is a varnished mahogany. And below the water line, Tortuga has its Douglas fir full-length keel. It's not very deep, about 6 inches along most of the length of the boat, and it gets to be about 18 inches aft, where the rudder is located, and the 20 by 13.3 inch 3-blade bronze propeller. Okay, let's go aboard. When you step aboard Tortuga, there is a settee at the aft end of this upper cabin house, and underneath that settee is all storage, and the storage extends out to the hull on either side and back to the transom, and you can actually slide underneath and get into the space under the aft deck, and it's about almost 3 feet high, so there's a lot of volume back there for storage. Coming forward, we've got a fold-down table on the starboard side. Now, there isn't one on the port right now. That's because it's at home being varnished, and I will be installing it at the end of the season because my wife doesn't like the smell of fresh varnish. And those tables fold down. They have a nice sturdy leg that has a pin in it that goes into a hole in the cabin sole. Cabin sole, as you can see, is satin varnished Douglas fir tongue and groove. Now, on either side, we have a couple of opening doors, and this doesn't give access to any real storage because that's where the fuel tanks are. There's a 20-gallon fuel tank on either side of the boat. And those tanks have their own independent fuel fills, and each tank is plumbed to its own Raycor fuel filter, and you can change which filter the tank is plumbed to with valves, and you can also change which tank you're drawing from. So if you get a fuel filter plug up when you're underway, all you have to do is change a valve and you're on a clean filter. And if you run out of fuel in one tank, just change a valve and you're on the other tank. At the forward of the cabin house, we have a small bridge deck and the companionway to the lower cabin. And the helm is on the port side, which is a little unusual for Maine. We have a bronze steering wheel here, and it has a cable steering back to the rudder, electrical panel to port. The blue gadget down there is a solar charge controller for the solar panels. There's a fire extinguisher. Got a VHF radio with a new antenna, a depth sounder slash fish finder, and right now I have a little Raspberry Pi based chart plotter. That's a 7-inch screen. In here, in this box, we have a gimbaled compass which has a date of 1941. And so that is the upper cabin. You can see this is a very pleasant place to sit in the evening when you're in an anchorage, because you can see all around the boat and really enjoy the anchorage. And in addition to that feature, there is also a Webasto diesel-fired forced air heater underneath the settee that vents outside, and there are ducts to bring hot air into the cabin. The black circular thing down there is one, and there's another duct in the lower cabin. And there's only one other thing I want to show you up here, and I'll get it ready in a second. Okay, I've now opened up the engine compartment. There's 2 inches of sound down sound insulation all the way around the engine. And here is the engine itself. This is a Volvo Penta D240 diesel. It's a 40 horsepower diesel, and it will push the boat up to a little over 9 knots at wide open throttle, And at 2,000 RPMs, it'll push the boat at just about 7 knots on flat water. I usually cruise at about 1,600 RPMs, which is about 6 knots. And because of the fact that it is a small diesel, it sips fuel. At 6 knots, we use about half a gallon an hour. I don't know if you can see it because of the light, but right down there is a Graco bronze strainer for the raw water input that goes through the heat exchanger. And this boat has a wet exhaust, which means that seawater comes in, goes through the heat exchanger, and is injected into the exhaust to both cool and quiet the exhaust, which then goes out the transom via a water lift muffler. Now what I'm going to do right now is fire up the engine so you can hear just how loud the engine is here in the cockpit, and you're standing just a few inches above the engine. Okay, I'm at the controls now. We've got the Volvo Penta gauges, a voltmeter, engine temperature, tachometer, and here we'll see engine hours and then the main control. To turn the engine on, turn the system on, and it's going to beep twice in a few seconds. I hope it will. There we go. Then we push the start button. And that's that. She's running. And you can hear just how loud the engine is. We're running at idle right now, which is a little under 900 RPMs. And I don't know if it'll show up, but you can see the engine currently has 305.4 hours. The throttle and shifter is a single lever over here, and I have disengaged the transmission. I'm just going to tweak it up to this is about 1,700 RPMs, very comfortable cruising speed. And although you can hear the engine, as you can in pretty much all power boats, you can also carry on a normal conversation here in the upper cabin. Okay, I'm going to shut the engine down. And to shut it down, we just press the stop button and then press the power button here again, and she's shut down. So that is the upper cabin aboard Tortuga. Let's take a look at the lower cabin. Well, here we are in the lower cabin. We'll start up at the forward end, which is the head. There's a relatively small head compartment. It has a Wilcox Crittenden Skipper 2 manual head. And these things are pretty much bulletproof. It's an all bronze head with a porcelain bowl. And as we step in here to port, we have a porcelain sink with only one tap. I only plumbed cold water up here because I usually just use it to rinse my hands. There are a couple little compartments, one on either side, to stow things. A mirror and access to the forepeak, where there is a holding tank, and there's the anchor chain and rod. So everything is set up. The head has the holding tank has a Y valve on it, which is currently set to the pump out fitting on deck. You can also set it the other way, like that, if you're 3 miles offshore and want to pump overboard. Overboard discharge is through this whale gusher pump and through a bronze through hull down below. Now as we move aft out of the head, on either side there's a large locker. The one on the port side has shelves in it, and the one on the starboard side is a hanging locker. And they have nice high fiddles on the top, so you can put lots of junk up there like I have. Now on either side of the cabin there are settee berths here, again with lots of junk on them. These berths are 6 feet 8 inches long, so you can sleep on them. And they have Sunbrella upholstered cushions that were new when I launched the boat for the first time in 2011. Underneath the port bunk is the house water tank. It's a 26-gallon bladder tank, and just after that tank is the water pump for domestic water, and there are access panels to get to both of those. Now on the starboard side there are 3 compartments for stowage. They're completely finished with the painted ceiling, these little strips of wood you see on the side of the hull, and so you can put anything you want in there, and there are access doors underneath the cushion. Aft to starboard we have a little desk which could be used as a chart table or as a preparation area for cooking, and with 2 drawers to the side and a stowage bin underneath that, and then another drawer there. And the top of the desk is satin varnished white maple. And another fire extinguisher. There are in this cabin 6 opening bronze ports, and the head has 2 and the overhead hatch. To starboard, or to port, we have the galley. That is an Origo 2-burner alcohol stove. It uses non-pressurized alcohol canisters, and it works quite well. And then we have the main power switch for all of the onboard circuits, and this little switch here turns on the pressure water pump, and I put that there intentionally because when you're in the galley is probably when you're going to want to use the pressurized water system. Here we have a Dometic CF40 refrigerated cooler which runs off 12 volts, and that provides refrigeration on the boat. And then a bronze sink which is nice and deep. It's about 8 inches deep, and a nice high-rise faucet that for the pressurized water, and there is hot and cold water here in the galley. Hot water is provided by a water heater which is underneath the sink down here, and that water heater is plumbed to the engine's cooling circuit, so if the engine's been running for say 20 minutes or more, you will have nice hot water. Okay, that is the lower cabin. There are panels that you can lift up in the cabin sole, which is painted Douglas fir, to get access to the keel if you want to inspect it. Underneath the galley stove are where the Raycor fuel filters are located, and also the bilge pumps. Tortuga has 3 bilge pumps. There is an 1100 gallon per hour rule bilge pump on either side of the keel at the lowest point in the boat, and they have individual float switches, and above that, sitting on top of the keel, is a 4,000 gallon per hour rule bilge pump with its own float switch. That one has never come on except during tests, which I run annually. And over here in the little stowage bin underneath the drawers, I have spares which include oil filter, fuel filters, both for the on-engine and Raycor filters, fan belt, and a spare bilge pump in case one of them should die. Okay, that pretty much covers Tortuga. And it is a very pleasant boat for day cruises. Really a nice boat to run around the area on, and have a fantastic view from up here in the upper cabin. And if you wish, you can do overnights on it and cook your meals on the stove, keep things cold in the refrigeration, and you'll have plenty of water available. Now, with the 40 gallons of fuel that the boat carries, you can probably run for about 70 hours with a little reserve at 6 knots, which gives you a bit over a 400 nautical mile range. Now, I fuel up more frequently than that just to keep the tanks relatively full and keep fuel in both tanks so that I won't have any issues that should I inadvertently run out of fuel in one tank. And one other thing about the fuel valving. It is possible to change the return setting on the fuel system so that you can draw fuel out of, say, the port tank, and the diesel engine will then return unused fuel to the starboard tank. And that is a mechanism to do two things: transfer fuel between the tanks, and since any fuel that goes to the engine goes through the Raycor fuel filter and the on-engine fuel filter, you're also going to filter the fuel. And I never put fuel in the starboard tank using the fuel fill. All of the fuel in that tank, and there's about 15 gallons in there right now, has gone through the fuel filters. So it is, if you will, filtered fuel, nice and clean, no matter what you get from the dock. So if I had a plugged fuel filter running off the port tank and I thought it was because I gotten some bad fuel, I would switch over to the starboard tank and the other Raycor fuel filter and probably be good to go until I burned up all the fuel in the starboard tank. Okay, that is Tortuga here in August 2021. Hope you enjoyed the tour and what the boat looks like, and I look forward to having you watch my next video. Thanks for watching.